Thank you for the warning. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no.
This feels good for a few minutes.
Yeah, I know.
You know why you're doing it.
This is house. Well, no, it's.
Good evening. Welcome to the January 16th regular city council meeting for the city of Ellensburg. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and if Councilmember Thompson would lead us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk call the roll?
Beauchamp. Here. Goodlow. Here. Lilquist. Here. Elliott.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Thompson.
Here. We have no proclamations today or awards and recognitions, so we'll move on to item number 4, approval of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I too will vote aye. Opposed? That motion passes. On to consent agenda.
I'll move the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion second to approve the consent agenda. That's pages 6 to 68 in our packet. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I too will vote aye. Opposed? That motion passes. And we move to item 6A, which is petitions, protests, and communications. And we have an appointment to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee. And this is an opportunity for public comment after we have that.
Mayor, would you like me to introduce that item?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Before you, you have a recommendation from the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee, a subcommittee, recommending a reappointment of Gemma Fortier for a term on the Lodging Tax Advisory Commission.
Okay, and that's page 69 in the packet. Is there any public comment on this? The appointment? Is there any discussion?
I was part of the interview panel, and Gemma is extremely well qualified for that position and has and will bring a lot to the committee.
Okay, thank you. So we do need a motion to reappoint Gemma Fortier to the Lodging Tax Committee as recommended.
I'll move approval.
Second.
So we have a motion and second to reappoint Gemma Fortier to the Lodging Tax Advisory Committee as recommended by that same committee. Is there any discussion? None? Those in favor?
Aye.
I too will vote aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Citizen comment on non-agenda items. So I'm going to get a list here in a second. So just let me quickly go over the rules. So comments only accepted in person, no virtual comments. Each speaker's comments limited to 3 minutes. Total time allowed for the agenda for all speakers would be 30 minutes unless we vote to extend that by the council. Speakers, do not identify yourselves as candidate for elective office or make any statements which assist or discuss a campaign of a candidate or elected office or discuss a campaign for or against ballot proposition, unless we were considering that, but we're not. Speakers must provide comments on non-agenda items, may only address the council on matters for which is the city's business and over which the council has control. When recognized to speak, name whether you live in the city or the county or elsewhere. whether you're representing yourself or others, and state the topic on which you wish to speak before making your comments. And no, that disrupts the meeting. And there we go. So I have a list of speakers and I have Angie Lang.
I have a question first.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is it possible to read a statement from somebody?
Absolutely. That can be your comment. Yes.
Great. Okay. My name is Angela Lang. I'm a resident here in Ellensburg. And this is a resident comment from Katie Olson, who is a business owner of an almost 100-year-old business here in town. Her comments: the City Council and Park Rec Commission have never been able to come up with a legitimate, logical reason as to why this update needs to happen on Craig's Hill. There is no danger, no public safety issue. Our community has a much, much bigger need and major issue that needs to be resolved, and that is quality, updated, accessible playgrounds and parks for our children. Also for our recreation center to be replaced after the shoddy makeshift one burnt down over a year ago. I did a public request recently, and the newest park playground equipment in Ellensburg is over 10 years old. Of the 6 parks we have with play structures and with play, 3 have been installed 30 years ago. We don't have any swings. We don't have any accessible playgrounds for disabled kids, and we have 0 for the young kids to do in this town. The city council can do much more beneficial things with the money that will benefit our community and our children. Our Parks Master Plan was last updated in 2016 and is so out of touch with the current climate and needs of our community, it's ridiculous. That was Katie Olson. Can I also say something?
You still have 1:40.
Okay. So I was looking at the expenses for the Reed Park project. And on the overlook part of these expenses, you've got the shrub removal of $3,800. And I'm assuming that is the shrubs at the top of the hill that we are expressing concern over, since we don't want the hill to fall down. Also, we have the viewing scopes, the picnic tables, and the seat bench. The scopes, the viewing scopes are $22,000. That's quite high in my view. The single seat bench, you've got $37,000. I mean, it's quite high, these expenses, and those things, these objects are all obstructions to the view down into the arena. If you've got people on a bench and they're trying to look down, you're behind, the cars are parked behind, I'm sorry, they are obstructions to the view. These are items that should not be along the viewpoint. Thank you.
Thank you. Miss Cheryl Chance.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cheryl Chance. I live in the county. And first, we're going to say what I discovered yesterday morning sitting in my recliner. I was looking at the city code, and I'm going to kind of piggyback on what Angie just said. I didn't know she was going to talk about that. But anyway, we have discussed with you, and you are aware that the 3, what do you call them? When you, the 3 documents that say in 1933, 1947, the deeds, okay, that's the word, the thing. Okay, so city code, I just want to remind you, if you all have a pen, write this down so you can go visit it. City code at 8:57 yesterday on your website states, city code 1.16.240, no obstruction to view of the arena. Nothing shall be erected or permitted on the hill slope, which will prevent a view of the arena by persons charged admission to the park. And that would be, of course, the Field and Stream, who splits the money with the rodeo board for Freeloaders Hill during Labor Day weekend and the rodeo. Next code that I looked at, which follows, is code 1.16.280, parking spaces to be provided. Parking spaces shall be provided between the Vista House, which is now the American Legion, and the reservoir, which we all know as the water tower, to be designated by a survey of who? That would be the county engineer. Currently, that is, I can't remember his name right now. Anyway, you guys would be able to find him under orders of who? That would be the county commissioners. We need a meeting. So to take care of the rest of my comments, I'm going to read a comment from Cecilia Crow, who is a resident of Ellensburg. And she states, "My question is why, when the citizens are against the changes? Secondly, if there are funds available, why not take care of the current issues such as broken sidewalks, potholes, and repairs to our park?" Second paragraph, yes, there is a potential homeless population issue. I know a few rodeo top hands that have attested to finding homeless folks around the barns and back buildings at the fairgrounds. Adding a bathroom would definitely attract to the homeless neighborhood. And since I still have a few minutes, I took a little cruise the other day up around the top of the whole hill where the contractor is. Did y'all know that his porta potty for the subcontractors and the contractor, by God, it's got a lock on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Haverlo.
My name is Scott Haverlow. I live in the city of Ellensburg. I'm going to read a statement from Bryce Herbst, who has been quite vocal on this issue. His father was the owner of the Western Auto Store in Ellensburg until his death at age 40 in 1942. Instead of preserving our hilltop, the city is attempting to turn the natural hilltop into a common, big, cold, city-like urban space. I don't want a sidewalk. I don't need a spiffy planted, city-approved shade tree. I want to walk on the natural grass of Craig's Hill and the dirt and look down on the town in which I grew up. Leave it alone. It is a viewpoint. If the city thinks that it can obtain millions of dollars to build an unwanted and unneeded park, why can't they come up with a priority list for the money for urgently needed repairs to existing facilities? What the record shows is years of neglect of the present parks, yet not wanting to add new and unwanted infrastructure that is either incredibly arrogant or foolish. Is there a potential homeless population issue? Yes. Would adding an outdoor public amenities such as a bathroom with running water have a downside? I'm curious how the city plans to deal with this if it were to become an issue. I'm sure the folks that lived up in those houses would not welcome the resident campers in the Reed Park area. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin Leberman. Rose Massey.
I'm a little short. I'm Rose Massey. I'm a resident of Ellensburg, and I'm reading a statement from Brigitte Mitchell. I don't know what new things they've already done on top of Craig's Hill, but the video about soil erosion and how important the juniper and sagebrush cover was for the whole side of the hill to keep the soil from getting washed down the hill into the fairgrounds seemed really important. That would seriously impact the residents on top, as well as everyone whose houses are below, as well as the fairgrounds. Maybe even the pool access. What a nightmare. Not even mentioning the Vista House, the American Legion, the Veterans Home. And if I've got a few minutes, can I make a statement?
Yes.
When you all, a few meetings back, approved the utility guy giving all this spiel about his new system, nowhere did I hear that you were going to be charging 2% of the gross billing to everybody who uses plastic cards. That impacts seniors, low-income people. It makes an impact on their lives by adding that extra fee to them every month on their utility bill. Thank you.
And Penny Whitman.
Thank you, Penny Whitman in Ellensburg. Okay, so a couple things here. The most important thing is that our city council and parks department don't make these changes, which will destroy the hill and hurt our community. What I would like to see is to be able to put a sidewalk, if you really insist on one, put it down the middle of that green grass and let people walk through there where there is some shade at certain parts of the day. The other thing is, remember, we're up on that hill where the wind blows 30 to 40 miles an hour. And if it's blowing that hard downtown at 20, it's blowing twice as hard up there. We go through American flags all the time because they're getting shredded from the wind. So what we need is you all to realize that I know you say we're being heard, but there is such a mess up there right now with mud everywhere. There is nothing put up to stop where you always usually see the orange fencing up and different things. There's nothing up there. There's no one flagging. You have to go up the wrong way. If they tear up the road, they don't let us know. So here we are, once again, and it's our community. It's not just us in here. We're hearing from everybody. So what we would really like is for us to do the right things and protect the environment around already, our soil, our hill. We don't want it destroyed. We don't want to see the American Legion slide off down into the rodeo. So please think about if we're going to follow the laws, we all have to follow the laws. If any of us would have done this in our own homes, we would have never been able to get a permit to do it. So I really would like to see the right things being done. If we're going to hold somebody accountable, then hold everybody accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who wishes to speak?
My name is Jennifer Pattison. I live in the county. I'm going to read a statement on behalf of Curtis Jules Rood, who's a resident of Ellensburg. This is a statement or my opinion about the restrooms in the Craigs Hill and Reed Park. Visitors, both local and out of town, don't go there for the amenities. They never have and they never will. We all go there for the solitude and the view. Yes, I think restrooms are needed, but not some high dollar 5-star facility. Portable units, $100 a month, which includes 1 week service. There's no expensive maintenance cost. Because they are portable, location is optional. The number of units is flexible. If for some reason it doesn't work out, you can cancel the order, cease making the payments. If the 5-star facility doesn't work out, you're stuck with it and most likely graffiti all over it. A portable is less likely to be vandalized and less likely to attract unwanted guests who do not want to spend the night in a single hole stall. Thank you in advance for your consideration. Sincerely, Curtis Jules Rood, concerned member and proud member of the Save Craigs Hill. And then I'd like to speak on my own. I am not sure if it was you guys or if it was the county, but I would like to say thank you for getting either the deal done with ACX or whatever has worked, because it's been awesome to see the work that started out there on Tuesday of getting that cleaned up. So I commend you on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kelleher?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pat Kelleher, Kittitas County, speaking on unity in Rotary Park. Since 2016, the city of Ellensburg has used Rotary Park as a parking lot. Tonight, I'd like to change or try to change the council's perspective. Rotary Park was renamed Unity Park in March of 2021. There's been a lot of work, planning, whatever, to the changes proposed at Unity Park. What is the community getting for the 2.8 million Walker Macy Unity Park plan? The proposed plan is going to build a 256-foot storage shed. Okay. You already have 900 square feet of storage at Unity Park, 3 times the amount. Walker Macy is going to build a concrete stage without a roof. You already have a stage with roof and awnings. Walker Macy is going to build shade structures. You already have 1,200 feet of shade structure. Walker Macy is going to have an interior plaza area. You already have an interior plaza area. Walker Macy is going to add new benches. You already have benches. Walker Macy is going to add new vegetation. You already have established vegetation with 40-year-old trees. Walker Macy is thinking about public art. You already have public art on exhibit. Walker Macy is proposing to remove the bowl. The bowl is already seated. The bowl was the #1 letter to the editor concern ever to the Daily Record, the controversy around the bowl. City Council, I played with you to give the existing Unity Park a chance to function as a community park. Close the park to vehicle use and install picnic tables. It's your only park without a picnic table. Reed Park has a picnic table. So does Whipple Park. The only new feature provided with the proposed Walker Macy Unity Park plan is two 8x8 heated, lockable, homeless homes. Our community already has 2 heated homeless shelters at the public restrooms at 3rd and Main. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to offer public comment on non-agenda items? Okay, thank you. We will move on to item 8A, which is a public hearing to consider supportive and emergency housing facilities, code amendments, and first reading of ordinance 4936. And this will be an opportunity for public comment. And this is page 73 in your packet.
Mr. Mayor, this is a legislative hearing, so there's a script for it.
I shall read from the script. So the purpose of this legislative hearing is for the city council to consider first reading of ordinance 4931 to establish an ad valorem property. Is this the right one? What's that?
36, 4936.
Okay, it says 4931, I'm just saying, okay. To establish an ad valorem property tax level for 2024. This is.
Sorry.
Feel like I'm trying.
It's deja vu. I
What a
take
page, what?
responsibility for that, Mr. Mayor. I printed the wrong one. It's for second reading, or excuse me, first reading of ordinance 4936, which is an ordinance which would regulate supportive and emergency housing.
As the city attorney said, the public hearing is now open. I will ask for your cooperation in the following procedure. Everyone will be given an opportunity to be heard. The city clerk will be making a recording of the proceedings. We'll first recognize requests to testify from anyone attending this hearing in person, followed by any person attending remotely via Zoom. If you wish to participate virtually by Zoom, raise your virtual hand and press *9. If you are connected by telephone, and wait until I've recognized your request, and then you have been unmuted. When you are invited to speak, begin by stating your name, address, and indicate whether you are speaking for yourself individually or a spokesperson for a certain group or both. Speak slowly and clearly. Only one person will be allowed to speak at a time. Any questions of staff are to be directed through the council. Before we hear from the audience, is there a staff report to be presented?
Yes, there is. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Dan Carlson, Community Development Director for the record. The amendments that are before you tonight would implement House Bill 1220, which the state legislature adopted in 2021. This bill requires cities to take action to accommodate transitional housing, emergency shelters, and other similar types of facilities through local planning. The bill requires cities to allow permanent supportive housing and transitional housing in all zones where residential dwellings and/or hotels are allowed. It requires cities to allow emergency housing and emergency shelters in zoning districts where hotels are allowed. And none of these things are currently in the Ellensburg City Code. The definitions for emergency shelter and emergency housing are contained in the bill. And the the definition of transitional housing is in RCW 8436.043. And permanent supportive housing definition is in RCW 3678-030. The bill also allows for cities to adopt reasonable occupancy, intensity of use and spacing requirements in order to protect the public health and safety. But those requirements can't serve to prevent the siting of these kind of facilities that are needed to accomplish the city's need for those kind of facilities. So the amendments that are included tonight would revise chapter 15.130 to add those new definitions. Those would be the definitions per the state laws that I just mentioned. With the exception of the definition of permanent supportive housing, the last sentence of that was added. That was a recommendation from Commerce to for consistency with the state Residential Landlord Tenant Act. So that one addition, but those definitions are all right from state law. The amendments we would amend section 15.31040, the residential based land use table, to include the new uses, and we would adopt a new section 15.340.080, which is standards for these facilities. Just a quick look at the zoning table changes for transitional housing and permanent supportive housing. Under that Landlord Tenant Act, these uses have to be regulated in the same manner as other multifamily uses. So for those two lines, we added the same, we made them permitted outright or conditional the same way we would treat other multifamily dwellings. The footnotes that you see are the same as other multifamily dwellings, except the addition of footnote 9. This is the one that refers to the new section with standards in it. And then for indoor emergency shelters and housing, what we did with this, the approach we took with this was to make those a permitted use in those districts where hotels are allowed. But we didn't want to limit the usage just to those. There may be a need to site these facilities in other residential districts. But since they are different, we decided to go with a conditional use in those so that those could be evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And then the new section with standards in it, it starts out with general requirements for all of these types of facilities, which would require compliance with the building and fire code, with public works development standards. There are also standards related to the site and transit, as well as operations of the facility. For emergency housing and emergency shelters, there's additional requirements that are put on there. We chose to go with the occupancy limits that are in the building code and fire code because those standards that the bill that you had to be based on public safety, and those are our codes for protecting public safety. And that section also has some standards related to facility operations and facility services. And then there is also a part of that new section that relates to permanent supportive and transitional housing. And for that, we adopted the zoning density standard for the particular zones. We referred back to the zoning density standards, and then that also has some facility services standards in it. So a notice of this public hearing was published in the Daily Record on December 21st, 2023. There have been no public comments received on this. This originally was a part of a bundle of land development code amendments that were adopted as a part of Ordinance 4935. About 1 week after we conducted the public hearing back in November with the Planning Commission, we received comments from Commerce that required some pretty substantial changes. So we made those changes, sent that back to Commerce to look at, and Commerce was good with the changes. They saw that we had substantially incorporated their comments, and they didn't have any additional comment on that. So Ellensburg City Code 15.250.100 gives us the decision criteria for amending the land development code. And that's that the amendment is in accord with the comprehensive plan, that it's not going to adversely affect the public health, safety, general welfare, and that it's in the best interest of the citizens and property owners of the city. The goal H2 of the housing goal of the comprehensive plan is to allow, encourage, and accommodate a variety of housing types and densities to meet the housing needs of all segments of the community. Policy E is to identify potential properties to allow for emergency housing, emergency shelters, and permanent supportive housing. So the amendments would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And the amendments would establish standards for safe and operation and appropriate siting of the facilities. They'd have to comply with the International Building Code, International Fire Code, Public Works Development Standards. And then permanent supportive and transitional housing would be subject to zoning density standards. So the proposal would comply with the comprehensive plan, wouldn't be adverse to the public health, safety, and general welfare, and would be in the interest of the city and the public. So the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this ordinance last week and unanimously recommended approval of the proposed amendments. And so with that, staff recommends that the council move to conduct the first reading of the supportive and emergency housing facilities ordinance 4936.
Thank you. The floor is open to testimony from the public. Does anybody from the public wish to comment on this matter? Mr. Kelleher, each person will have an opportunity to address the council for initial period not to exceed 5 minutes. If more time is needed, it will be made available after everybody has had an opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to compliment the city during this cold snap. You made a provision for, I would call it indoor emergency shelter at the Hal Home Center over the weekend, and that's going on. And I think that's most welcomed and was probably well used. Now let's look at your zoning. Hal Home Center is PR. No longer allowed. I think you should take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else from the public who wishes to comment? Okay, does staff have anything to add?
Let's try to get to that that table really quickly here.
Page 109.
Yeah, I think just the one comment that was I guess just in what we hadn't considered it for that zoning district, I think through the work that we did with the Affordable Housing Commission and the Planning Commission, but decided to go with the permitted uses where the hotels were allowed and expand it to some of the other residential districts. I don't really have a recommendation either way as far as including it in the PR zone.
Okay, so actually we'll just move to council and I think it'll come right back up. So council, do you have any questions of staff or the public?
I guess I would follow up on that. I think it's an excellent point. I think particularly the emergency shelter component as opposed to the various types of housing, which is super temporary versus longer term. So if it was the council's desire to include that, would this require that change to be coordinated back through Commerce and Planning Commission before we move forward, or is that at our discretion? No, I don't believe so. It's not a significant enough change that it would be required to go back through Commerce. Yeah. And I don't know how the council feels about it, but it strikes me that as was pointed out, I think in an emergency situation, the community
does come to expect the city to use facilities at its disposal. Public reserve seems to fit that, in my opinion.
And I guess I would tag on to that because I think it's a good point, and I'm very supportive of amending this so that it fits. But we use school facilities.
Mr. Mayor, you're still in the public hearing portion.
Aren't we in the questions piece? I'm gonna ask a question here.
Well, I crossed over,
Oh,
sorry. from
sorry, my bad.
Question to opinion, sorry.
Okay, so as an additional question, do we need to do anything to, not only count for Hal Homes, but the churches? Do all of them fit underneath this definition and are allowed, and the schools that are used as emergency shelters?
And I would add, anticipating using the field house as an emergency shelter in the disaster kind of scenario, as well as the event center has been.
So I guess broadly, do we need to change, and are those changes cumulatively enough that we need to adjust the process?
I don't think, if I might speak, Dan, I think the process doesn't need to be adjusted, but I think for second reading, we could bring it back, adding in the PR zone. I think that point is well taken, looking at the definition of indoor emergency shelters. But I don't think it has to go back to the planning commission because it is the PR zone. So it is the governmental owned property.
Does that cover churches, and does that cover overnight stays?
PR zone, PR is not church, but all of those uses would be either in a permitted zone or conditional use zone for all those. So it's.
All
they would
churches
be
fall into
covered.
those
Yes.
zones, okay,
One of the commercial zones.
including the fairgrounds.
Well, they would be PR.
So we sleep in the fairgrounds.
Right.
You being a different entity.
No, I mean, yeah,
But only under emergency
Right.
Authorization,
conditions.
isn't it approved?
okay, so we've asked the question, we'll move into the next part because it'll probably come back in a recommendation piece. Are there any other questions of staff or public? Okay, the public testimony portion of this hearing is now closed. Council may to begin its discussion and deliberation in this matter. So I think we initially need a motion so that we could potentially amend or
I'll move first reading of the support of an emergency housing facilities ordinance 4936.
do we have a second?
Yeah, I think I heard.
Motion and a second to conduct first reading of support of emergency housing facilities ordinance 4936. Is there any discussion?
Well, I would offer an amendment to include for the category of indoor emergency shelter, which is found on page one at the top of 109. I would include I would recommend identifying that as a permitted use with the same footnote number 9 in the PR zone. In other words, just add the PR column to the permitted uses.
I'll second.
So a motion and second to amend the first reading of ordinance 4936. The amendment is on page 109. It's a table, top left or top right corner. Would be adding permitted use under the PR zone for indoor emergency shelter and not the housing one, correct?
That was my intent.
Is there any discussion?
I'm just trying to think of implications and where the PR zones are and if there might be any reason to add to the housing pieces, but I can't think of that, so.
So I guess I believe there is, and that maybe this is further discussion and an additional amendment. During emergency sheltering, we shelter people in schools. Actually physically can have them sleep inside the schools. That's PR. And they're sleeping there. It's not just a temporary shelter. It's not an emergency shelter. They're housing there.
Well, I don't,
Sometimes for days.
yeah, and I don't think of emergency shelter as just temporary in the sense of an hour or two out of the weather. I think it could be overnight for several days, in an emergency situation, I think. I'm not
Was that
sure of any-
definition?
Yeah, it just says temporary shelter, doesn't specify time, duration. Now, to the point about emergency housing, I mean, I could also see a scenario where, per the definition, again, it's temporary and it's indoor accommodations. That could also be accommodated in a PR zone, but perhaps it's so unique that it would be more of a conditional use and location specific. Just a thought. I know that's not.
And in an emergency, you would have to go through the fairly lengthy conditional use process, right?
Presumably,
So as a follow-up question is, we relocate 100 people to a school for 2 weeks. Is that still emergency shelter or are we into the housing?
So I'm going to read the definition of the indoor emergency housing means temporary indoor accommodations for individuals or families who are homeless or at imminent risk of being homeless, that is intended to address the basic health, food, clothing, and personal hygiene needs of individuals or families. Emergency housing may or may not require occupants to enter into a lease or an occupancy agreement, versus indoor emergency shelter means a facility that provides a temporary shelter for individuals or families who are currently homeless. Emergency shelter may not require occupant to enter into a lease or occupancy agreement. Emergency shelter facilities may include day and warming centers that do not provide overnight night accommodations.
So it sounds like the definition's flexible enough that we could cover it under the shelter one.
I think so. I think, to me, I think the scenario we should be thinking about, I mean, this, we've seen glimpses of this. If we had a large scale wildfire event that made, suddenly 100 folks homeless because they lost their homes, we would want to be able to accommodate them in an emergency situation such as we're describing. So I think it would fall upon us to be looking at our public reserve facilities and land areas to do that. This isn't just capturing various homeless folks that wander through the community. This could be a large scale event. And this isn't really set up for that, but I think it could be.
I think your amendment covers it. I'm comfortable with it. So.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment?
Is there a vote on the amendment?
Yes.
No, it's just been discussed.
Thanks for bringing that up, Mr. Kelleher.
Yes.
Okay, so we're voting on the amendment, which is the table addition on page 109. It's adding permitted use under indoor emergency shelter to public reserve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I too vote aye. Opposed? That motion passes. So we're back to the amended ordinance 4936. Does anybody have any further discussion? Hearing none. Oh, you don't have to call the roll. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I too will vote aye. Opposed? That motion passes.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Ellensburg, Washington relating to zoning and the regulation of supportive housing facilities, amending sections 15.130.90, 15.130.160, 15.130.200, and 15.310.40, and adding a new section 15.340.80, standards for permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, emergency housing, and emergency shelter facilities to the Ellensburg City Code.
Did that all without breathing. Okay, item 9A in the agenda packet, page 125. This is resolution 2024-01, allocation of 2024 lodging tax funds. And this again is an opportunity for public comment.
So Heidi Barron, Sternaway, your city manager. I have a staff report to present on this item. Before you have a recommendation from the Lodging Tax Advisory Commission about the spending for the 2024 lodging tax through the consolidated process. On an annual basis, the city sets aside 13% of the lodging tax that you collect from the previous year to be included in a consolidated process. And this is where all the jurisdictions from across the county that collect lodging tax review applications in a much more efficient process. Out of that process, and again, our entire Lodging Tax Commission membership participates in evaluating all of those applications that come in for lodging tax dollars to fund events and activities that help support tourism throughout the county. That recommendation, again, the members may vote and go through a very extensive selection process to make a recommendation for funding for those events and activities. And before you, you have the recommendation that again was approved by the city's Lodging Tax Commission and to fund for 2024.
Thank you. Is there any questions of staff? This is an opportunity for public comment. Does anybody in the audience wish to make a comment? And online, I have a couple of people online. That means nobody, right? Nobody's raising their hand.
No, you
Okay.
see it right there.
So we have nobody online as well. So council discussion and or a motion, please.
I'll move to adopt resolution 2024-01, approving the allocation of the 2024 lodging tax funds.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve resolution 2024-01, which is the 2024 lodging tax fund allocation. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I too will vote aye. Opposed? That motion passes. We will move to item 9B, which is page 129 in your packet. This is resolution 2024-02. This is adoption of the city's sustainability and energy plan. And again, this will be an opportunity for public comment.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Buddy Stanovich, Energy Resources Manager. Before you tonight is resolution 2024-02, the adoption of the city's sustainability and energy plan. Included among others in council's strategic vision is energy and resource management, as well as sustainable infrastructure. The strategic vision, along with the state's legislation, influence the city-owned electric and gas utilities, the municipality, and the community at large. Any actions taken by one group to advance that vision or comply with the legislation can have significant impact on the other group. Making these policy and decision makings difficult and challenging. For those reasons, we've put together this final sustainability and energy plan, and staff's recommendation would be to adopt resolution 2024-02, committing the city to the sustainability and energy plan as a standard that guides the city when making those future decisions. I have Christy Hoffpower joining us remotely that will walk you through a short presentation on the plan. Can answer any questions and go from there.
Thank you, Buddy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. And I share my screen. And you can see my screen okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for having me here this evening. And this is a very exciting day for the team that worked on this project. We've been working on this for about a year. And I just want to, my name's Christy Hoffpower. As Buddy mentioned, I work for McKinstry and we led this effort. But I do want to make sure and acknowledge everyone's work that went into this. Give me 1 second here. There we go. McKinstry is the firm that I represent. We also had Cumming Group. They have expertise in greenhouse gas emissions inventories and the plan writing. Also, Lighthouse Energy, where we were able to draw on Ted Lighthouse's expertise on the compliance aspects of the plan, and also Critical Data, who helped us with the survey of the community. So this was an effort that took several people. I also want to thank the steering committee that helped guide us through this process, Buddy Stanovich for leading that, and also the city administrative staff that helped in the workshops. So a lot of work went into this over the past year, and we're really excited that we've made it to this point. I'm just going to walk through briefly the purpose of the plan, the baseline data analysis, how some of the steps that we went through to develop the plan, and then the roadmap, the next steps. So this sustainability and energy plan, as Buddy mentioned, is a combination of a plan to help meet the sustainability goals that the city has set, but also to be in compliance with Washington State. And there's multiple legislative things that we needed to comply with, primarily because the city is also a utility. So they fall under CETA. All building owners in the state of Washington fall under the Clean Buildings Performance Standard. And then the utility also falls under the CCA. So we wanted to make sure that the plan both met the goals of sustainability and also the compliance factors. And this plan is meant to be a guide for the city, a guide when they're making policy decisions or investment decisions, and a roadmap to be able to see the progress as the city goes from where their baseline is now to where they would like to be. It is not intended to be just a checklist of actions to go down top to bottom, but more of a guideline and a roadmap of what to consider in order to make those decisions going forward. I'm going to start with some charts and graphs because it's important to understand this going into it. So the first step is to, and just for anybody that's not as familiar with this, the sustainability plan is looking at greenhouse gas emissions. And those emissions come from both municipal activities and community activities. And we looked at both of those. And this chart can be a little bit difficult to understand at first. So take a moment. It is in the package on page 142 and also page 160, if you have that. So this on the left is just showing where the greenhouse gas emissions are coming from for the municipal activities. And you can see that that comes from mobile combustion, so burning fossil fuels for transportation, the wastewater treatment plant, and then stationary combustion, which would be your heating and cooling of buildings. So this chart is starting out at the baseline in 2022, and this is showing your greenhouse gas emissions. This is projected out to 2050, and that top dotted red line would be where the city's emissions would be if they took no action. And so that's factoring in growth of the community and would show that pretty substantial increase in emissions if they did nothing. Now, each one of these bands represents an estimate of the emission reductions that would occur for each of Washington State's mandates. So this is the Cap and Invest program, new vehicle fuel economy standards, grid carbon intensity, EV standards legislation, the clean fuel standard, all of these things combined. So every one of these colored bands is showing a reduction in that forecast based on following Washington State legislation and mandates that have been already enacted. So following that, yes?
Can I, before you move off this slide, just for context, so go over to the pie graph next door. And I completely understand mobile combustion, but when you talk about the wastewater treatment, is that the methane produced by producing this, or is this like the energy to process wastewater? What accounts for that ginormous number?
I believe that it's both. The energy that it takes to process the wastewater treatment plant is pretty high. And it also produces emissions as well.
Okay. Okay, and the
So
stationary combustion, that's, or excuse me, mobile combustion, is that everybody that drives through the community, or is that factored on people that live here?
this is the municipal emissions. So when I go to the next slide, we'll talk about the community emissions, which would be the community driving in the city.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm. So if you can follow the bottom line, that shows that by 2050, there would be a 9% increase from where you are today if you only followed the state legislation. Okay. So if that's clear, I'm going to go to the next slide. And this is the exact same format, but now we're talking about community-wide. So now we're talking about mobile combustion, not just that the city has, but the entire community. And so you can see the pie changes because there's the wastewater treatment plants is only run by the municipality. And certainly mobile combustion makes up the majority, although heating and cooling is also in there as well. So in this case, again, if we did nothing, we would follow that top red dotted line and end there in 2050. It's an increase of 158%. If we follow Washington state legislation, we will have a decrease by 54% from 2022. And you can see this big dark green chunk in the center has to do with electric vehicle standards. So this is a good baseline because it showed us where you're starting at, where you would be at the end of this time period. And it spurred a lot of discussion in the answering the question of whether compliance is enough or whether the city should do more than comply. Because you can see that compliance does make a significant dent in the greenhouse gas emissions. So,
but does
from
not,
that, it does not get you where you want your goal to be, but it makes a significant reduction. So then we wanted to talk to the community, okay? And the purpose of our community outreach, there's kind of 3 phases to this outreach, and that was to help prioritize and get a feel for what the community wanted to see in the plan. So the first step in this is actually a requirement of CETA, and it says that a utility has to take into account the effects that their decisions will have on vulnerable populations. Because some of the actions that you could take could potentially increase rates, and that could affect some people more than other people. So there's a requirement to take that into consideration. And in order to do that, the vulnerable population needs to be defined. So the first step of this is the legislation requires that be that there's public input into that process. So the state doesn't decide who your vulnerable populations are, the utility doesn't, but the utility working in conjunction with the community would decide for the city of Ellensburg who those vulnerable populations are. This is a good thing because it's very unique to your community and can be tailored to your community as opposed to being told what a vulnerable population is. So in order to do this, we did executive interviews with 8 community organizations, and those community organizations were already active in the community and have a good pulse on the vulnerable community members that they serve. So we did those executive interviews, and I'll show you, I'll just jump quickly. This is the definition that they concluded on vulnerable populations in Ellensburg. So that would include low income, unaffordable housing, unemployed, high transportation expense, non-native English speakers, and people with disabilities. So that was the first step in the community outreach. The second step was an online survey. Hopefully all of you saw that. This is a survey that went out. It was publicized through the utility bills going to all utility customers. And then it was an online survey. And that was where we asked several questions pertaining to the different strategies the city could take. And the last step that we took was executive interviews. These were one-on-one executive interviews with the top utility customers and community stakeholders. And those might be folks that were representing large members of the population, such as large employers. And that was to get some deeper understanding from just an online survey. There's so many things that you can do with an online survey, but with an executive interview, we're able to ask more of the why and what would you do and what would you like to see. So that was the 3 prongs of community outreach that went into the plan. So now getting into the plan itself. And this starts on page 144 in your agenda packet. And there's a strategy for each category. There's actions that you could take to accomplish that strategy, and then a designation of the target area. So we talked about municipal greenhouse gas emissions and community greenhouse gas emissions. So you can tell just by looking at the little building or the little people, what is the target area for each one of these. So there were 5 categories: energy, green buildings, transportation, water, and land use. Those would all be impacting those sources of greenhouse gas emissions. Each one of those has 3 or 4 key strategies. And again, if you're following, this is on page 144. And then each one of those has actions. So in total, there's 78 actions that were identified that the city could take. And this is why I said this isn't intended to be start at the top and work through to the bottom. It's intended to be something to consider as you're making investment decisions, policy decisions. I won't read all of them, or we will be here for quite a while, but in your packet, you can go through and see what those actions are. So I'll go to the next steps that the city intends to take. And that would include a prioritization matrix. So everybody wants to know how much it's going to cost. And if we spend that money, how much are we going to reduce our emissions by? And that takes a deeper dive than what we did in this initial plan. I can give you an example. We looked at all of the municipal buildings to see their energy use and to see how that compares to a high efficiency building. And we identified a couple buildings that are high. And so that gives some direction that the city can take to address that. We did not do an in-depth audit or for example, the pool is a very high consumer of energy. There's many ways you could address that. So we didn't get into the actual detailed audit of how you would go about either replacing that building or improving that building, but we did identify which buildings you would want to start with first. So there will be deeper cost benefit impact analysis on these actions that the city might consider. Also looking at funding and staff resources, leveraging internal staff, but also state and federal funding. I will tell you now, because I do this day in and day out, the list of grants coming out from Commerce is so long, it's getting difficult for me to keep track of all of them. So there will be funding opportunities. And, we help to identify those as well to find ways to pay for some of these projects. And then the last one is reporting. So there's some reporting that is required by the legislation for your utility. And then progress reports that the city will look to see how they're progressing against their goals and against the baseline. That is what I had to present.
Thank you.
We'll stop sharing. Are there any questions for me?
Council? Okay, this would also be a good opportunity for public input.
I have a lot, Pat Kelleher, Kittitas County. I have a lot of concerns with this. This is another plan mandated by the state to have a plan, to study a plan, to review a plan, and put the plan on the bookshelf. This will never be used in actual implementation. If you look at the municipal emissions forecast, and you look at the left graph, it goes from 1,000 to 6,000 MTCU, whatever, bad stuff. You go over to the community-wide emissions forecast, it goes from 100,000 to 400,000. Okay. I glanced at this. Is the municipal, what is the boundary of the municipal? I don't know. What is the boundary of the community? I don't know. Is the municipal a subset of the community? I don't know. So it's just, these are good organizations that are on the grant. Oh, there's plenty of grants out there to get this stuff done. Do you know where that grant money comes from? You got one. I got one. That's where that grant money comes from. Get that grant money before someone else gets in your wallet. Okay, that's where that grant money comes. Now, on page 59, they're talking about winter demand response potential. Residential is the biggest share of that. There's a graph so smooth, like a baby's behind. Okay, you can't get demand response unless you have demand meters on your residential customers. Doesn't work. Can't do it. Okay, so when are you going to raise your electrical rates to install demand response meters? And if you did install demand response meters, they would happen at a certain period in time. So you wouldn't have this smooth curve. You would have a huge stair step. No meters, new meters, stair step, people reacting to the take a shower, cost you $10. We program that into our demand response. So we use less demand at that peak period. You know, the graph's changing on the left side. You know, they show these huge graphs from zero in my time up. I do want to mention the therms from your gas, 400,000 in your cycle there. You might be backing yourself into a corner with this plan to get rid of gas. And where are you going to find the energy to replace it? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience?
Jennifer Pattison, Kittitas County resident. So if we're coming in from the county into town to charge our vehicles, you're going to have to consider that into it sounds like you guys only looked at all of your city, everything that's going to be happening within the city, but everybody from the county, when they come in to do stuff, is going to be using your utilities as well. I have been an electrician here for a long time, and I would be curious to know in 26 years. How are you going to build? And what are you going to build? You guys got a nuclear power plant in your backyard? 26 years is not a very long time to be building something that will increase enough power to do everything that electrically that you will be replacing with gas. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Council? Motion or conversation? Questions of staff?
I'll move to adopt resolution 2024-02, committing the city to the sustainability and energy plan.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve resolution 2024-02, which is the adoption of the city's sustainability and energy plan. Is there any discussion?
The comments were made that it's a plan that's not going to get used. I think it will. I think we utilize the comprehensive plan all the time, the Parks and Rec plan. I mean, all of our plans don't sit on a shelf. They get utilized, and the provisions brought forward every time we make a decision that's related. I agree with the comment that there is a risk in electrifying everything, because there's not a solid plan from the state or and BPA where we'll get the energy. But I'm also very much aware that the cost of not decarbonizing in Ellensburg, in the state, worldwide, the costs will be far more than the costs of what is contemplated by the state's goals. So this is something we need to do. It is a moral obligation to reduce our carbon emissions, and this plan is the first step in providing us the roadmap of how to get there. Yeah, and I do want to make an amendment to the resolution as well. Yeah, so I would move to amend the resolution to include an additional whereas. Whereas the sustainability and energy plan was also guided by the 2019 Washington Clean Buildings Act to lower costs and pollution from fossil fuel consumption in the state's existing covered buildings and multifamily dwellings. And so here's the. So
Hang on, we gotta have second.
Second, approves.
Okay, so the motion and second is to add an whereas. This would be added on page 133 in our packet. I guess wherever a whereas would go. And the language is, whereas the sustainability and energy plan was also guided by the 2019 Clean Buildings Act to lower costs and pollution from fossil fuel consumption in the state's existing covered buildings and multifamily dwellings. And so we're having conversation about the amendment or the additional whereas.
So the amendment is offered because, so it's just the resolution cites the city's strategic plan and the state's Clean Energy Transformation Act and the Climate Commitment Act. But one of the main pillars of what's in the sustainability plan was around meeting the goals of the state's Clean Buildings Act as well. So I just thought it was important to recognize that.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, so we're voting on the amendment only. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Two will vote aye, opposed. That motion passes. So we are back to an amended resolution and any further discussion. I get, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rich.
Well, I guess I have something to add here and I get it. It feels like we're out front of something that I have the sense that, you know, there are a number of legal mandates and potential financial implications from the legal side that are pushing us towards this planning effort and implementation of this planning effort. And, you know, aside from, you know, sort of the moral arguments, there are legal arguments that we have to do this. I look at this as we're trusting our subject matter experts to help us guide down a pathway, you know, to be in compliance with the state law right now. If the state law changes, or if the technology changes, or if things prove to be, you know, the wrong pathway to go down, it's reasonably easy to modify the plan. But doing nothing is not an option. And so, you know, I support this. You know, I'm uncomfortable with this. This is going to drive costs up. This is going to change things. There are infrastructure problems. There are power generation problems to be addressed, but we can't keep going down the pathway. You know, you can make that argument from a moral perspective, but you can also make it from a business and a legal perspective. Doing nothing is not an option.
Yeah, I would echo my agreement with both Councilmember Lipquist and Mayor Elliott's comments. From a personal perspective, this is a goal that I hope to be able to help accomplish when I was elected. And so this is a very special day for me. I agree, it has to be done. I got my electric bill yesterday and I wasn't too happy, but I'm going to do my part. So thank you very much, Christy, and all the folks that work with you. And thank you, Buddy, for your leadership from the staff perspective on this. It is a good day.
I guess I'll throw in my 2 cents. I'll probably be the one dissenting voice, and that's okay. You know, this is, for me, an agenda that's been going on for quite some time. It's funny, if you go back through Reader's Digest, believe it or not, I've read every single one since 1955. And back in the 70s, it was global cooling. In the 90s, it was global warming. Now it's climate change. And I think I could back a plan like this if back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we hadn't given up on nuclear. We're going to electrify everything. We're going to take away a major source of energy in oil and natural gas. And I see all around citizens that are pushing back on it. Hertz Rent-A-Cars is selling 20,000 of their new electric vehicles back into the market. Nobody wants to rent them. If you go down into Texas right now, you've got a parking lot of Teslas because it's too cold. And so for me, I totally understand the legal, the state mandates, you know, that's just the unfortunate nature of where we are in the government stack. But I guess for me, I've got to I got to say no on this one, because I don't fully understand how we're going to get to where we're supposed to get from this. And so that's where that's coming from. I know there's a lot of dissenting voices in the community. So I guess on this one, I'll be that voice. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I'll just echo some of the comments. I agree. I think this is not going to be pleasant for anyone, but as was stated, the alternative of doing nothing or waiting for something new to come around the corner isn't really an option. We all take our job seriously here, and I think we have an obligation to follow the laws of the state of Washington and the direction given from Olympia, whether we personally agree with it or not. And I think that in this case, we are complying with state law. And I also, as the mayor mentioned, from my perspective, there's a lot more about the future, what this all looks like I think that we don't know today. And trying to make a decision today saying, well, let's wait until we know everything. I don't think we'll ever be in that situation. 10 years from now, the technology differences are going to be astronomically different than we think they are. And I think just standing still, waiting for the perfect storm of technology to land quietly on us is just not going to happen. It's unrealistic. And I get it. It's not easy. And even the fits and starts with electrification that we're seeing with electric vehicles and other things. I'm seeing it with aircraft in my other job. Progress isn't, entirely linear. I don't think it ever is. And I think that we have to admit that we're all trying to make incremental improvements. And I think the city of Ellensburg is in a unique position as a utility owner and operator, where we're going to have to lead on this. And I think this begins the process. So I think everyone can see all the challenges with this and probably a lot we don't see yet, but I think we're committing to moving forward because I agree, doing nothing is not an option.
And just at the tail end of this, when you say we think it's, our obligation to follow state law, that was our oath.
Yes, that's what
we
I
have
tried to say it's generally. We're
But-
bound
but-
by our.
Yeah,
oath.
but in addition to that, I think that, I look at a plan like this and there are pieces that, for lack of a better term, feel like low hanging fruit. They seem to be things that we can trust that, are going to result in the intended outcomes and are going to have a return on investment that is reasonable. There are things here that we're trusting, the infrastructure, we're trusting modular nuclear reactors, all of the technology that's coming out of the Tri-Cities right now. There are technological solutions, whether or not they exist in the form that they exist in today, that are going to change things. But, there's hydrogen, there's other options here, but, yeah, I feel like we've got to start somewhere. And, I would encourage, staff to bring the things to us that, feel a little bit tried and true and tested, and we can predict what those returns on those investments are going to be, because it's going to make this implementation a little bit easier and set us up for, maybe not making the wrong decisions. So as we move through this, is there any further discussion?
I would add to those comments, I would trust the staff to keep us posted on new technologies and new developments and bringing those to our awareness also. If those produce us a path that might be a little bit faster, quicker, or easier, so.
I just want to add the piece of this that I kind of don't feel like is strong enough in this is that impact on vulnerable populations, and how we're going to deal with that, how we're going to keep our rates reasonable for our constituents, especially those low income folks who are stretched so thin right now. But I think that's got to be a lens that we keep foremost to as we make the decisions on which of these policy, which of the goals, which of the action items we're going to do first, low hanging fruit, and let's keep that vulnerable population definitions in mind as well.
Okay, so we have an amended resolution 2402 that we're going to vote on. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 I too will vote aye. Opposed?
No.
That motion passes. So we will move to item 9C, which is resolution 2024-03. This is to reject all bids related to bid call 2023-19 related to Penning Road and a shared use pathway. And there will be an opportunity for public comment here as well. This is page 347 in the packet.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Derek Mayo, City Engineer. City of Ellensburg and Kittitas County received a federal grant for the design and construction of a 12-foot wide multi-use pathway on the west side of Penning Road to connect the existing Third Avenue pathway and the Palusta Cascades Trail. The project also includes piping the existing irrigation ditch, installation of curb gutter, and street illumination. Staff completed the design and the project was put out to bid in this last December, and bids were opened on December 21st. This is a federally funded project, and with that, there is additional bid requirements included, including the mandatory disadvantaged business enterprise goal of a 13% utilization of certified disadvantaged contractors or subcontractors. So staff opened 11 bids. The top 4 bids were sent to WashDOT for their concurrent review of the federal requirements. WashDOT found errors and irregularities in the disadvantaged business enterprise utilization documentation in all 4 of the low bids. Bidders number 1, 2, and 4 did not meet the requirements, and WashDOT cannot concur of award for those bidders. Also, bidder number 3 had documentation errors that WashDOT would need further review to determine if we would be allowed to award them. In addition to the DBE issues, the city has minimum requirements for previous work experience. As such, in review of the bids, bidders 1 through 3 did not include sufficient enough information to show that they met these minimum requirements. WashDOT and staff did not evaluate bids beyond the top 4, as those bids are beyond the available budget for the project. Based on these errors with the top 4 bids, staff would recommend that council reject bids and allow staff to rebid the project, with staff working closer with bidders to help them understand the guidelines of the DBE and the mandatory documentation requirements due to the federal funding. So with this, staff recommends council adopt resolution 2024-03, rejecting all bids for bid call number 2023-19. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Questions for staff? Seeing none, I will offer an opportunity for public comment.
Pat Kelleher, Kittitas County, speaking for myself. 2 concerns. One is in your bid call, if you were going to reject bids over the engineer's estimate, it doesn't appear that that was clear to the 7 bidders that complied with the bid call. Who cares about the other 4? They couldn't read the directions. To exceed. So what was the award? This is a government project funded. How much was it funded for? How much are we short? Take the money out of Unity Park funds and get it done. That my second concern is this. This is a walk to school. There's a little less than 50% of the school population that could feed through here to our local schools. Walk Fenning Road, walk on the irrigation culvert, be on the 36-inch section and have cars go by you. I dare you. I did it Sunday. Nobody was on the road. The car that passed me went into the other lane to avoid me. That's what we're putting our kids in. So to not make the bid clear that, hey, you better be under our money available or we're going to reject it, and not to come up with funds to support safe transport, pedestrian transport to our schools. We hear this walk to school, oh God, yes. The schools never do it. They didn't complete the sidewalks. You didn't make them complete the crosswalks at Mount Stewart before you opened the school. There were kids walking across the street. There was no cutout. There was no crosswalk. It's time that we get serious about public safety for our kids going to school and encourage them to go to school. I won't get into the fences I had to climb to go to school when I was a kid, but it was around Whitney Park and I was in 2nd grade. So we need to make it safe for the kids. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, council.
Mr. Mayor, I move council approval of resolution 2024-03, which would reject all bids for bid call 2023-19, the Fenning Road Shared Use Pathway Project.
I'll second.
We have a motion and second to approve resolution 2024-03, which rejects bid call 2023-19, Fenning Road Shared Use Pathway. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I would just point out, and it's good point raised by the comment that as part of this resolution, there will be a staff is directed to rebid the project. And I expect that will be post haste.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, staff is ready to go out to bid on that this week, so.
So I have a question for the engineer. What will you do different this time so that we don't have to come back to this same scenario?
Educating our bid, educating the bidders, I guess. There are some, the federal documentation's fairly challenging, and the mandate, the goal is increased quite a bit, and so having them fill out the documentation correctly, so just educating them, just being able to answer questions and stuff that we can't change the requirements, we can't change the rules on the documentation, but we can offer assistance if they call with questions and we can offer that up.
Great, thank you.
And just kind of as a point of clarification, staff presented that the top 4 bids were evaluated. There is no guarantee that the next 7 bids applied either, because they weren't even evaluated.
Correct.
So we have a motion second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I too will vote aye. Opposed? Resolution 2024-03 passes. We are to item 12A, page 350, and the manager's report. You don't have a 350-page manager's report.
I do not have a 350-page manager's report. Good evening, Council. Heidi Barrett, Away City Manager. Just a notice about a purchase of natural gas and also sale of allowances for greenhouse gases. A reminder that there is an open application position or open application for position number 3 and on council. Applications will be accepted through February 5th, and you do have a special meeting scheduled on February 12th. That is a Monday, February 12th at 6 p.m. for interviews. And I will be sending a reminder out to you all with a list of questions just to finalize those in advance of closing the application. And so if you have any specific comments on those, please let me know. Or if you want to submit alternative questions, we can manage those administratively. In addition, just a reminder, our study session on February 5th, we will be having an update with the city actually hired lobbyist services. And so our lobbyist, Josh Weiss, will be joining us remotely for part of that study session, talking about the session priorities and our work thus far. And in the manager's report, we also attached the Conference of Governments, if people refer to COG, that's what they mean. The resolution passed at the end of December, committing to explore regional planning with COG. And so on behalf of the mayor and council member Goodloe as our city representatives, that's part of our packet today, just for an informational opportunity for you all and an opportunity to discuss if there's any concerns moving forward with exploring that at the COG level. So that's all I have for tonight. I guess I do have one more thing. We do have an executive session tonight. We do recommend 10 minutes and there will not be any action following exec session.
So just as a quick follow-up, item 3, the city council applications. Do we have some?
We have 2 applications, yes.
Okay. Still an opportunity for people to apply.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll do council member reports before we go into executive session. We'll start with you, Sarah.
All right, so developmental disabilities was canceled because we had too many sick. Affordable housing, unfortunately, I had to miss due to a conflict in my schedule. Parks was canceled because they didn't have a quorum. So update library, this Saturday, the 20th is their big birthday celebration. I think it's from 11:30 to 1:30, somewhere in those hours. They're gonna have tours of the library, the archives, have cake. It's gonna be a fun day, just a celebration. At KitCom, this was my first sit-in and it was a pretty good one because they had invited 4 candidates for the director's position for KitCom, and 2 accepted the final interview process, and they've got 2 very qualified people. So hopefully there'll be a decision made shortly, and we leave Rich of his duties there and he's counting the days. So that is it for me.
Great. Well, I have a short report. The only committee that I've met with this month so far is the DEI Commission. Things are moving along there, planning some good work for this year, spending quite a bit of time on some recommendation to council regarding the Zoom bombing responses that you asked for. Have COG and UAC later this week.
I attended an airport advisory commission meeting. Recommended some changes to the website to make the business park more prominent. They're morphed into a discussion of traffic impact fees that the new FBO was assessed and didn't know he was going to be. So and the consultants are starting a public process to participate in their economic development plan for the business park and the airport. I attended a homelessness ad hoc meeting, planning an open house in February now, pushed it back a little bit, and kind of attended by Zoom the Centerfuse West Interchange presentation at their board meeting the other day. And I guess you can talk about that were you there? I believe you did. Okay. I think I mentioned before what I think that one of their recommendations is that the city and county work together on a sub-area plan. So that's something that we might consider when our community development department brings us their work plan. Just kind of keep that in mind. Ben.
Let's see, just a handful of meetings. Arts Commission meeting last week. They're busy with a lot of things. One of the projects they've been working on is they've developed a prototype for a new 25th anniversary Art Walk logo, and it's very, very stylish. And I think they're moving forward with that. So that's going to be something they're going to be able to add to the celebration of that event. Attended just kind of under the heading of just in time. I attended the Planning Commission meeting last week that I was reassigned to. So it was good timing because, as it turns out, they had a public hearing on the supportive housing ordinance that came before us tonight. So I actually had the benefit of listening to that staff presentation. So I actually came into the nights with a little bit better background than I would have been otherwise, which is always good. And then today met with PTAC. Business is good. Just a stat for those who are interested, the fixed route ridership, that's all the people that ride the fixed routes in Central Transit. 2023 numbers were up 27% over 2022. And that followed a big bump post-COVID. So we're kind of out of the COVID recovery, but there's strong sustained growth. So it looks really strong. And then it's not really an issue or a discussion I've had with anyone, but it seems I can't even pin it down in my mind, but I've had more than one conversation in the last several weeks with people asking about a third interchange in Ellensburg. And I know in the past there has been one that was on a DOT WashDOT long-term plan and it disappeared. And I was told it's never to come back again, but with all the development that's occurring between the two interchanges, people are starting to ask about that. Where are the trucks going to go and how is this going to be handled? Anticipating a lot more truck traffic between the freeway and those large industrial facilities. So I don't know if that's a conversation that has surfaced in recent years or months, but people have been asking. So
as I recall, it was the distance between the two existing, that WashDOT said, no, you can't put another one there.
That sounds about right, but yeah, people are asking, so.
Yeah.
That's all I have. Thank you.
And officially, I think we have crappy interchanges. Very poorly designed. In my opinion.
Those are those highway planners. It's not as smooth as airports, what can I say?
Councilmember Thompson.
That was, attended, Parks with Sarah, but it was, not to meet because of quorum, so I'll be on to the next one. I attended the, Landmark and Design Commission. And, the one issue they were dealing with, their new issue was a consideration for a certificate of appropriateness to replace a wall that was, at 310 North Pearl. Hearing the contractor, who showed up to talk about it, about the fact that on the inside of the wall, if you push, you could see the movement in the bricks on the other side because there's no foundation to it. It was just kind of put up. So I was very glad that was a unanimous yes to go ahead and get that taken care of. And then I was at the Chamber of Commerce meeting with Rich, and that was it was interesting. It was the first one. All these, of course, are kind of my first one right now. But it was just kind of interesting to hear what the chamber is planning on for the future and for this year and some of the issues coming down from like new taxes from Washington State. One that stood out was the tax on electronic devices, where they want to add $2 on the sale of every new device of $250 or more. But from my reading, it wasn't really clear where that money actually would go. So I don't know if it was just a grab for money to use someplace else, but hopefully something like that doesn't go through. But that was it, short and sweet.
Okay, just very briefly, just to kind of, we brought it up, the West Interchange project is effectively trying to consolidate some of the flood control areas and potentially make some of the land along Dollar Way and at the West Interchange functional or not be as restricted based off the flood mapping. We just came, Nancy, myself, and the city managers came from the State of the Community Chamber sponsored event at the Hotel Windrow. And just the initial run through the panel, which were mayors and one of the commissioners, was a general theme that, there's a lot of activity, there's a lot of infrastructure challenges in many communities. We're affected by those as well. But there was a general consensus that our efforts to this point, and not just us, but the other municipalities and the county, to begin to align our efforts and sort of act more cooperatively and take advantage of each other's wins and not sort of step on each other's toes, so to speak, is being recognized. And I think that that's something we need to continue. We need to continue to message out to the community that the expectation is that we're all working together, and a win in a neighboring community is at worst neutral, but it's probably a win for the entire county, and we should all be working in that direction. And I think that mentality is beginning to become more commonplace. And so that's a really positive thing. So we are going to adjourn into an executive session. This is RCW 4230-110-1I, legal counsel representing agency matters related to enforcement actions or legal counsel litigation or potential litigation, and that we may become party to when public comment or public knowledge of that discussion would result in adverse legal or financial consequences. We're taking 10 minutes initially, and when we come back, the only action we expect to take is adjourning. Just semi-publicly, like to point out that you came to us and you delayed spending money, which is unusual.
Take it. I'll take
Save
it.
us money.
Take it.
Late spending.
Take it. That's the sign that you want this, just so it doesn't walk away. It's ready to come to you.
I will take it. Perfect. I'll do that too. Thank you. I know. It is cold out there. You come in here and it's like, oh my gosh, it is warm. And already, I'm surprised. I didn't think it was the. Start up already.
Yeah.
We're not here for too long. Yeah.
pending 3 minutes. Motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
We done? Thank you.
We're done.
Thank you.